What's up guys, Artem MMA Analysis here. Sorry if there's any background noise in this video, it's just that very windy outside. But let's get straight into the video. LFA 128, I went 6-2, which I don't think is actually too bad of a record considering it was pretty hard to kind of predict guys that haven't really fought too much. On the hand of LFA 129 though, you can kind of see like a decent amount of more experienced guys. Like there's a lot of guys here that have more experience, more fights than LFA 128. But once again, like I feel like with the guys that just haven't fought very often, I feel like you're a lot safer keeping the money in your pockets. And now with that intro out of the way, let's just get straight into the first fight. And the first fight I'm going to be looking for is a pro fight. I'm not going to cover the amateur fight, sorry. Is that Mike O'Gorman versus Austin Robinson? This is such a strange fight, man. I mean, Mike O'Gorman hasn't fought for 6 years. And the 2 wins that he does have his record, he is 2-2, which is a nicer record to have than 0-1. Is went over a guy that was 0-5 7 years ago, and went over a guy that was 0-12 8 years ago. Like, I don't really know what is going on with Mike O'Gorman's record right now. I don't know why he's taken 6 years off. But Austin Robinson, on the other hand, is a younger guy. He's only 24 years old. He's fighting up a little bit at 145, and he's probably going to be looking to make some improvements off his last fight where he lost to Kwang Lee, who was also fighting on the card. He's fighting out of Manson City Fight Team, Gracie Fighter. I don't know if that's a jiu-jitsu team, but all of his last couple of wins, actually all of his wins in his amateur career are by submission. So you know what, 4-3 amateur record ain't the greatest, but I do believe that he's going to have the more activity. Well, he's been more active than Mike O'Gorman's what I'm trying to say, and I do think that he's going to be able to beat Mike O'Gorman here. He was 6 foot. I don't know if he's a thin guy. He must be thin enough to make the 145 pound weight class at 6 foot. So good for him, but I do trust Austin Robinson to get a win here. He is 0-1, but I'm picking him to win. Do not throw any money on this fight whatsoever. I'm with Robinson's submission side. I don't think that the fight probably will go the distance. Both of O'Gorman's fights wins are inside the distance, and actually all of his wins fights are inside the distance. There's no odds out for this fight. In fact, there's no odds out for this card, but I will be going with Austin Robinson to win the fight right here. Okay, so the second fight I'm going to look at is Malik versus Vang. Another kind of weird fight. I tried to find a little bit more information about these guys. Malik last lost his fight in LFA, which you can watch. But prior to that, he was fighting on the regional scene. And wasn't fighting, like, he was fighting a long time ago. This guy's only 24 years old. And like, he made his pro debut when he was like 20 years old. But he is only 5 foot tall, fighting at 136 pound division. And Vang, on the other hand, is 5'7". And I did a little bit of research on this guy, and his amateur record does look pretty good. And it says here, he's got a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm assuming this is Vang here. I believe he's got that blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu there. And you can tell that he is actually very well rounded. He seems to have more like a Muay Thai background as well. He does, I believe, have a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, as I said. And he's the pure FC featherweight amateur 145 pounder champion. And he did actually have a decent enough amateur record. He went 4-1 with a good win over a guy that was 4-0 at a time. And you know what, like, I can kind of respect that. He did run into Kwang Lee, who once again, as I said, is also on this card and is 3-0. But he's running into Malik. I think that Rochelle does have a good chance to get the win. But you know what, guys, I'm going to be picking Vang again. But do not put money on this fight, man. This is a 3-3 guy versus an 0-1 guy. You're crazy to be putting money on this one. I'm going to go with Vang. I'm going to go with Vang by probably like a KO. So, you know what? I'm just going to go Vang by decision. I think he's going to be like quite well rounded. He's got a great Muay Thai background, clearly. He's also got that blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, so I think he probably could hold himself on the ground with Malik. I don't know Malik's credentials because I found an Instagram page that I thought was his, but it was private, so I can't really find anything on that. And I didn't do too much digging on Malik because this is just early on in the prelims of LFA. He's 5 foot tall, so Vang is going to have a decent size advantage over him as well. Hopefully he's able to utilize that and turn his record around to from 0-1 to 1-1. And if we move on to the second fight, man, we've got Miguel Simpson taking on Gonzalo Ponce. Gonzalo Ponce is 4-4 at the moment, but at one time he was 3-0, so good for him. But unfortunately, Gonzalo just not taking in the greatest luck recently, and I do believe Miguel Simpson, as a prospect at LFA, is going to try and build up, because this guy definitely does have a future ahead of him. His last win was by a split decision, and he did win a unanimous decision in his debut, but he's fighting often, man. He fought 5 months ago, and he fought 3 months ago, and now he's bouncing back again. So this guy's fighting often. I like to see it. He's only 23 years old, so he can get away with it. And Another thing that I like to see is like undefeated amateur record, and all of those wins inside the distance on the amateur scene. Unfortunately, hasn't got a finish on the pro scene, but I do believe that he probably could be able to finish Gonzalo Ponce. Of Gonzalo Ponce's 4 professional losses, all of them are by finish. One of them by TKO here, submission, and TKO there against Tim Sosa. But the thing about Gonzalo Ponce, he's also got a 100% finish rate himself. So he's got 3 submission wins on his pro record and 1 TKO loss on his TKO win, on his pro record. But he also, of his 5 wins, all of them are by submission. So you know that Gonzalo Ponce does actually have a pretty decent ground game that maybe Miguel Sanson probably wants to avoid, just depending on where Miguel Sanson's level is. It's kind of hard to get a read on these guys again, but Miguel Sanson, I do genuinely believe that he's something special, man. I do believe the LFA is really trying to build this guy into a prospect that maybe they could see work out later on. But as you can see, man, you can tell that Sanson does take the fight game very seriously. His Instagram is pretty much all fights. It's all him training and stuff. So you know that he's really taking his MMA career seriously, which I respect. And I'm going to be backing that, guys. I'm going to be backing Miguel Sanson here. Gonzalo Ponce, unfortunately for him, he has gone 1-4. But he did have a very extensive amateur record as well, which I do respect. But I'm going to be going with Sanson. You know what? I'm going to be going with Sanson inside the distance, but don't be surprised if we get a decision here. All of Ponce's wins and losses in his pro career are actually by finish. So maybe, I mean, Ponce is a finisher. We could see Ponce get a finish, but I'm going with Miguel Sanson to get the job done in this one here. And in this next one, we've got another weird fight. We've got Derek Smith coming off a very long layoff, or not necessarily coming off a long layoff, but his last fight was only a couple of months ago against Zach Otto, who was a former UFC fighter. He got submitted there. And then before that, like he beat a guy 7 years ago. Like Derek Smith, man, took 7 years off and then fought a former UFC fighter in Zach Otto. That's pretty insane. That's pretty savage, man. Like, you kind of respect that, but then the inactivity here really does scare me. When you've got a guy like Scott Ritz, he's 29 years old. You can tell he's really trying to build his career. He's taken a fight in Bellator before. He didn't win, but then he got signed to the LFA, and since then, you know, he's fighting LFA again after he lost in the LFA a couple of years ago. So he's probably going to be trying to redeem that loss that he had back then. But if you actually look at his record, very extensive amateur record. He went 7-1 with the one blemish being in 2016, and since then he beat this guy that was 7-1 and 7-5 on the amateur scene, made his debut and fought a couple of guys that weren't super high level, and he still kind of is building up his record. He is only 4-2 after all. But to be honest, man, I think I've seen enough already. I do genuinely believe that we're going to see Scott Ritz get a win on this one here. Derek Smith, like, he hasn't fought like very often whatsoever, and I feel like that's kind of all I need to know. Maybe Derek Smith is no disrespect to him, man, like, good for him to get in the cage, but I feel like if you're taking a 7-year layoff, maybe he's doing it for fun, maybe he's doing it for a little bit of money or something. Like no disrespect to Derek Smith, like, that is a very disrespectful thing that I just said, but you know, like, why would you come off a 7-year layoff? You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have to give me a good reason for that one there, for me to pick you to beat a guy that is up and coming, a guy that is clearly hungry, and a guy that has not turned 30 years old yet, and is obviously going to be trying to build up a couple of wins so he can get back into Bellator, so he can get back into the big names and back on a win streak, you know. So I'm gonna be going with Scott Ritz here. And I'm going to be going with him by finish as well. I mean, Smith did get submitted by Zach Otto, but that was only a couple of months ago. And Zach Otto, a former UFC fighter, as I just said, guys. So, yeah, you know what? I'm going to be going with Ritz inside the distance, but I do think he will get the job done. I didn't really research this fight whatsoever, as you can tell. I'm kind of not really saying anything that means anything here, but just the fact that Derek Smith hasn't really fought for about 7 years is all I really need to know, to be honest, to pick Scott Ritz, in my opinion. What's up, guys? Moving on to the next one, Quang Le versus Sam Penitz, I believe is how you say his name, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the odds are for this one, because I'm going with Sam Penitz over Quang Le here. Quang Le, he missed weight in his last fight. He obviously took a bantamweight fight, missed the weight, landed in at 137 pounds, sorry. And that fight was only about a week and 2 days ago at the time of recording, so that was only a couple of weeks before this fight is taking place. So now he's going to have to cut the weight again and try and make 135 pounds again. And that's not going to be super easy for him, considering he missed weight the first time. And on the hand of Sam Penitz, this guy's been fighting amateurly since he was 18 years old. He's 24 now, and he does only have a 2-1 record. But Look at his amateur record. He made his amateur debut when he was 18 years old, went 13-1, and then decided to go pro. Unfortunately, he did lose his professional debut, but he bounced back pretty quickly, beat Brandon Morse, who was 0-2, and then he bounced back pretty quickly again after that and beat Joey von Blackenberg, and now he's taking about a 4 or 5 months time off. And now he's going to be fighting, he's taking 3 months off, what am I talking about? And now he's taking on Kwang Lee here on a full camp. I do think that he can beat Kwang Lee. He's got great power in the hands, Kwang Lee. Of his wins though, 2 first-round submissions onside the distance, 2 first-round submissions, pretty respectable there. And he did beat Vang, who's on the card, who I picked to win his fight. And he did beat Austin Robertson, who I believe I also picked to win his fight in the next fight. So he does have good wins on his record. But I'm going to trust the amateur background for Sam Penitz. I'm going to trust their mixed martial arts background that we have seen from Sam Penitz in the past. That we have seen he went to the World Championships. Unfortunately, a split decision lost there. But Kwang Lee, man, a great pro record, 3-0 right now. And if he does beat Sam Penitz, it will be a good win to have on his name. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna be going with Sam Penitz to win the fight, and that's against the Tapology votes again. I'm going Sam Penitz. That amateur record really does excite me. I looked into his Instagram, but unfortunately I closed the tab. So yeah, like, he's got great power in the hands. He does throw with a lot of heat. He did get 5 KOs in the amateur scene, which is pretty respectable. His 2 wins are by decision. We'll see if he can get a finish in this one here against Kwang Lee, taking the fight on short notice. Alright, this next fight is between 2 savages, Tik Cummins, who has fought in BKFC before and won, and Dylan Budka, who has fought twice in the last 2 weeks or so. Like, that's absolutely insane. He beat Rudy McLaughlin about 2 weeks and 2 days ago, and then a week later he beat Jet Jones. I mean, like, yes, guys that don't have the greatest records in the world, but you can still respect that quite a bit here. Dylan Budka, he did lose his debut against a guy that was 2-0, but prior to that he did actually have a decent enough amateur record. And he went 7-2 in that record, so that's pretty cool. Tik Cummins, though, as I'm saying, bare knuckle boxing experience. One of them inside the BKFC cage itself, and he went 5-3 in his amateur record. But Dylan Budka and Tik Cummins, actually, both of these guys fighting at middleweight here when their last fight was actually at 205 pounds. And I like the level of competition that Tik Cummins has fought inside of his professional MMA career. Like, you know, like a debuting guy, a guy with a losing record in his first couple of fights, but then he jumped straight into it, and he fought a guy with a 5-0 record. Since then he did beat a guy with a losing record, and then he did lose to Josh Silveira, who's now in the PFL. So, like, you know, that kind of just happens, I guess. I'm going to trust Tik Cummins again to win this fight here. I think that he's on the full camp. Dylan Budka is going to have to cut all the way down to 185, which he hasn't done recently since he did fight at 206 pounds. Only about a week ago at the time of recording this video. And you know what, Tik Cummins on the full camp, I'm going to trust him to get the job done, and I do expect, you know what, another KO. All 4 of his wins are by KO. I do think he'll get the job done. Hopefully Dylan Budka, puts on a good performance here, because he does fight very often, man. This guy takes fights on short notice like it's nothing else. But I'm going Tik Cummins. I'm going with my majority, and I'm also going to be going by knockout here. Dylan Budka going to have to cut down to 185 pounds. On only like a week's notice or a few days notice. I'm going to trust in Tik Cummins on the full camp to get the job done on that one there. And the next one we've got Tyus White, who I believe is a prospect, another prospect that LFA is trying to build up here, against Jeff Gibson, who is an older guy but also does have a decent amateur record and also a decent amount of pro experience. Let's just look straight over Tyus White and Jeff Gibson's records, I guess. So Tyus White, he fought in LFA in the amateur scene, and he won his fight there twice, actually. And 4-0 as an amateur. Now he's 4-1 after running into a more experienced Tony Laramie in his last fight there. But he does have some decent wins on his record, I guess. Like, there's a ground and pound TKO against Travis Crane, and then there's a couple of submissions and then a decision. But Jeff Gibson's also got a decent amount. Like, this is what I like to see about the newer MMA fighters. Like, these guys are fighting on the amateur scene. They're building an amateur record, kind of like boxers do, really, getting the experience before they put a couple of numbers beside their name on the pro scene. And Jeff Gibson went 6-2 as an amateur, and then he went on a decent win streak before he ran into a very experienced Nate Williams and lost to him twice, unfortunately. So actually 2 of his losses on the record are to the same guy. But now he's fighting in Tyus White, and Tyus White I like as a prospect, and I will be picking him to win. I don't really agree with the 92% of Tapology picking Tyus White. I don't know if that is just based off of record or something like that. But maybe they did the research like me. Like, Tyus White fighting out of Pure B to BJJ, so you know he's got a good ground game, and he does actually have a good ground game. But unfortunately, I couldn't find like what his belt was in jiu-jitsu, but I did see this photo and I knew that he did have a background in wrestling, so I did a little bit of research. I found that he has been to the NJCAA National Championship. I don't know if that's in college, but I'm assuming it is, and I couldn't find a college wrestling background, but I did find his high school wrestling background, which is 120 wins to 16 losses, which is pretty respectable there, in my opinion. So we know Tyus White's got a wrestling background. We know he's got a jiu-jitsu background as well. He does seem to be training a decent amount of kickboxing on his Instagram there, which is pretty cool. So I think that's pretty sick as well. I guess like Tyus White is decent. He's well rounded. He's got a good ground game. I think that his ground game is going to be good enough to beat a guy like Jeff Gibson. Although Gibson, like the thing is with this guy, 2 of his losses are actually to the same guy. So technically, like if you count that guy out, he is 6-1. But I guess that is not how math works or records work whatsoever. Also worth noting, Gibson is fighting at flyweight this fight, and he's going to have to cut weight down 10 pounds more than he did last fight in his year and a half ago. So yeah, he's going to have to cut that a little bit extra weight, and even then Tyus White's going to be the bigger guy in the octagon anyway. So yeah, I'm picking Tyus White to win the fight, decision or submission in my opinion. Alright, if we move on to the next fight, we've got Haider Emil. I did find the age of Haider Emil, and Sherdog says that he's 31 years old, in case anyone was wondering. I doubt you were, but in case you were. And Haider Emil now dropping down to 145 pounds, even though he missed weight by a few pounds 4 months ago against Hobson Jr. Devontae Sewell though, I'm actually quite impressed by this guy's record. He's 9-6, but of the losses that he's had to very high level competition, Cody Durden, who's now in the UFC, Josh Sweeney, who just recently fought at X MMA, and Aaron Phillips as well. That's probably a name that a lot of people will recognize, who also fought in the UFC. And then Ari Fares, I believe he also made it to a big no he didn't. Why am I an idiot? But anyway, like the point is, like the guys that he's been losing to are a very high level competition. I am like low key, like my spider senses are tingling here. I do think that there is a potential for a upset in this one here. I do think Devontae Sewell actually has a chance to upset Haider Emil, but I'm going to be picking Haider Emil anyway. He does seem to kind of been taking the fight game pretty seriously. All of his posts on his Instagram pretty much seem to be about fighting, so you know that he's taking his pro record seriously. He's 5-0, and also he's got a lot of Bellator experience. I believe he's had 1, 2, 3 fights in Bellator, all of them wins, but then he took a lot of time off, bounced back against Hobson Jr., and then won by a KO. So good for him, man. We know that he's very well rounded. We know that he's good because he has fought in Bellator before, 3 times actually. But I don't know what happened in between that 2-year period that he took off. But I mean, we're gonna find out really if he's made some improvements. I'm picking Haider Emil to win the fight inside the distance. But Sewell, man, Sewell could be a pretty live dog, like depending on how insane the odds are. Because LFA and like smaller promotion odds do sometimes get really ridiculous. Like, if you've got $10 to spare, I feel like Sewell, out of all of like the big dogs that are gonna be on the card, could be like the dog to play. But I mean, like the thing is, like off the wins, like not the greatest wins, but the guys that he's lost to, I'm very impressed by the level of competition and how well those losses have aged. I'm picking Haider Emil to win the fight, but he's 31 years old, and if he wants to get into the UFC or another big promotion again, he's probably gonna have to fight like a couple of times very soon to build up that record, because Dana White's Contender Series, they're scouting right now, so they're probably going to be watching this card as well, and I will be talking about the main event as in Dana White's Contender Series scouting later. The next fight that I'm going to be looking at is Matt Brown versus Carlos Mota. This is my second time recording it because I just said some stupid things, but Carlos Mota's really impressed me, man. His pro record is actually quite good. He's fought decent levels of competition, like as a debuting fighter, he fought a 2-0 guy, and then he fought a 9-3 guy, which is pretty insane. And since then he got signed to LFA after fighting over at Shooto Brazil a few times, and main evented his last fight. He fought Charles Johnson, who I actually think that Charles Johnson is on the radar right now for like Dana White's Contender Series or something like that. I think there is a decent amount of buzz behind Charles Johnson right now. A shame that Carlos Mota wasn't able to get that, but I do think that if he does beat Matt Brown, which I am picking him to do, it's going to look pretty good on his record. Matt Brown, 40 years old, fighting at 125 pounds against a guy like Carlos Mota, who is going to be very aggressive and moving forward quite often. And I think Carlos Mota is going to knock out Matt Brown. It really sucks, man. He is 40 years old. He's not the immortal, unfortunately. and he hasn't fought for 3 years. Like, as a 40-year-old fighter fighting for LFA and you haven't fought for 3 years, I just don't know, man. I just really don't know. Like, he took 3 years off between his last fights, and now he's fighting again. I think Carlos Mota, man, like, the level of competition that he's been fighting recently is actually pretty high level in LFA. He fought a 9-3 guy over before he even got to LFA as well. Beat him. I'm picking Mota to win inside the distance, probably by a KO. This fight must have been announced very recently because only 18 Tapology predictions. But Carlos Mota, I really am picking him to win here. I do think he's going to get the job done inside the distance. And now the main event of LFA 129, and my Mystic Mac prediction for this is that the winner is going to fight on Dana White's Contender Series this year, or they're going to get a contract in a big league, because I know that the UFC is pretty desperately looking for heavyweights right now. Sorry, that's just me trying to move around my cable. But Thomas Petersen, I'm picking Thomas Petersen to win, but I did read a very interesting conversation on like the Tapology forums, I guess you could say, or chat room or whatever, and this guy said that he's interested in the Acosta fight because he made the choice to go away from RUF and give up the chance of a one championship contract and take LFA. If he wins, this could mean that he gets UFC, and he did bet on the right horse, but if he loses, then he made the wrong choice, given that the one spot was probably easier for him to win. Anyways, he doesn't think that he's top 10 in neither one or UFC. I mean, it is what it is. He's only 5-0, you know what I mean? But and then he said he wasn't really courted, simply he was winning from a tournament that gave him a one contract. And the UFC needs heavyweights, which they really do. And usually being a LFA champion does mean getting a UFC contract. So Manga 18 is correct in that here. But I'm picking Thomas Petersen to win. Seems like most people are too, by KO. Because like, this guy's good, man. This guy, I believe all but one of his fights have been taking place inside LFA, and he's been fighting relatively good competition. He beat Vernon Lewis in his last fight, which is 7 months ago. Cortes-Acosta has beaten Derek Weaver, but and did beat Mota Reese, who's in the PFL right now, which actually is a pretty good win, but he didn't finish Mota Reese, and Mota Reese has been very known for not being very chinny whatsoever. So I'm picking Thomas Petersen to finish Cortes-Acosta. As I said, like, it seems like he has taken a couple of risks. He's got a boxing background as well, it seems, with a decent amateur record as well. But yeah, what I'm really trying to say is that I just think that the level of competition at Thomas Petersen is probably lower than Waldo Cortes-Acosta. But I think that he's ready. I think that the winner of this fight is going to fight on Dana White's Contender Series, because Dana White's Contender Series is going to contain a lot of heavyweights, man. Because Dana White needs heavyweights in his roster. He also needs flyweights as well. I think Dana White and like the team at UFC is going to be taking a close eye at this fight. The winner will probably be getting sent a Dana White's Contender Series contract. No real doubt in my mind. I'm picking Thomas Petersen to win. I think after this, as a 27-year-old prospect, man, we're going to see him fight on Dana White's Contender Series. And I'm pretty much looking forward to it.